It's preparing to stream. It actually may be streaming. All right, I see it streaming. Good deal. And we're live. All right, so today's topic is, does the universe have COVID? There's a really bad
title there.
There's a really bad title for a YouTube video because it'll be demonetized.
Yeah.
Oh wait, we aren't monetized to begin with.
There you go.
We don't get any money for stuff, so I don't care if they don't put commercials in it or whatever. And the only people that come and see this are people that are actually looking for it.
That's true.
So anyway, last week, or last time I should say, we started out the section of the chapter that says taking the history and making the diagnosis. And it gave the example of Jose, who lived in Mexico and was taking he came in with some really bad blurred vision and into the ER, and the doctor's trying to figure out what's going on. All the tests are coming back negative. Nothing wrong with him that could be causing this, and and he's asking, you sure there's nothing been happening and stuff like this? And he's insisting, nothing been going on, nothing wrong. And then finally, when he gets to the point where he can barely talk, he finally says, yeah, doc. The doc says again, you sure there was nothing going on before? And the doc says, and he says to the doc, yeah, doc, I shoot up heroin. I get my heroin down in Mexico, and down there it's very common to get what is called black tar heroin, and it is very common to get what's it? Botulism from it because of it. And sure enough, when he looked closely at the places where he had injected himself, there was the signs of botulism. And now that he had the diagnosis of that it's botulism, how to treat it. But it wasn't coming up on the list of normal tests to test for someone having blurred vision and slurring speech and stuff. It happens, but it doesn't happen that often. So it's how do you treat a disease, a sickness, if you don't know what the sickness is?
Yeah.
So on the same note, we're going to go into, is the universe sick? Does it have COVID?
Yeah.
Well, of course, the universe doesn't have COVID. It's the sickness that the universe has been around for a long time, long before COVID came on the scene.
The universe isn't sick, it's just
Well, it's more than just us, but it isn't the whole universe.
That's right. Well, it isn't. I would say the largest percentage of the
Right.
universe isn't.
Right. That is a very fair assessment. So anyway, it says in medicine, taking the correct diagnosis is the first step towards selecting the appropriate treatment. In the same way, as we seek to understand the sufferings we see around us every day, our diagnosis of the problem must be correct if we ever hope to identify the solution. In the case of Jose, making the correct diagnosis required knowing what was going on in his life prior to developing the symptoms of botulism.
I wonder why they have botulism in heroin. Maybe some people had heroin when they were making a doctor or something.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's strange how botulism could get into heroin.
Yeah,
But that's okay.
I think it's part of the the low grade process that they use. All they care about is making the money and for the cheapest amount.
They were eating those
I don't know. I really don't know about botulism, so I can't even speculate. Are the cosmic conflict theology invites the same question as we try to understand a sin-sick world. Are you sure there wasn't something going on before you got sick? So let's roll up our sleeves and try to arrive at a correct diagnosis regarding our sick patient, in this case, suffering humanity. We will do this by taking a history of the sin problem. But who would we be the best person to interview? If we were to ask Abraham, David, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Peter, or John, wouldn't they all agree with these words about the sin-sick and self-centered condition of their own heart? I do not do the good I want to do. Instead, I do the evil that I don't want to do. What an unhappy man I am. Who will rescue me from this body that is taking me to death? Romans 19 and 24.
So is that Paul or Luke?
That's Paul.
That's Paul. And he's just saying here that, wouldn't all of those people that were listed, Abraham, David, wouldn't they all agree with that same statement that Paul makes? I do the things I don't want to do. What an unhappy man I am. In order to understand how humanity got sick in the first place, we need to talk with someone who was well at one time. Adam and Eve had the remarkable distinction that for at least some period of time, they reflected the character of their creator. God spoke, "Let us make human beings in our image, make them reflecting our nature." And God creating beings, when God created human beings, he created them godlike, reflecting his nature. What is God's nature?
Love.
Love. God is love. So we've talked about what really love really is. Love is patient, love is kind. If we look at the life of Christ, Ellen White describes it as he went about looking to do good for those around him. His compassion was beyond measure. If we look at when Jesus was on the triumphal entry, when he was going to Jerusalem, when he was up on the hill looking down at Jerusalem, he cried with compassion because he knew what was going to happen. His heart was always full of compassion. And Adam and Eve had hearts like that. And even Lucifer, before he fell, he had a heart like that. All the beings had hearts. All the intelligent beings had hearts. And many of them, like you were saying, many of them still do have hearts like that, but some have not. And here we're talking about, what happened. Sure. I think right there,
Okay.
before we consider.
Before we consider what happened to Adam and Eve, it is critical that we recognize that all was well in the universe when God created Eden, as evidenced by the presence of the subtle and crafty snake in the tree. Not until the last book of the Bible is this ancient serpent positively identified as Satan.
Is that a true statement?
Here's a quote.
Was all well in the universe at that time.
On earth.
At,
And so,
I don't know.
at which time? I'm sorry. I missed that particular part.
This earth was all well in the universe.
Had Satan been, had he fallen then?
oh,
We don't
I
know.
stand corrected. It says, it is critical that we recognize that all was not well in the universe.
Okay.
Sorry, I misread. You are right. Thank you. All was not well in the universe when God created Eden, as evidenced by. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Here's a quote. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, who fought back with his angels, and the dragon was defeated. And he and his angels were not allowed to stay in heaven any longer. the huge dragon was thrown out, that ancient serpent named the devil or Satan that has deceived the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth and all his angels with him. This is Revelation 12, 7 through 9. It says GNB as far as which version.
That's Good News Bible.
Okay. The context of the Eden.
So when did that happen? Was that after Christ came to this earth and died? Or was that before that?
That was
That was before the creation.
Do you think? Or then why was Satan doing up there talking with him in heaven, counsels with him in heaven, saying, hey, you got some shaky people down there, showing one that's better. He was there with Ruth, in heaven at that time.
Yeah. With the story with Job there, the setting is that he comes up for a kind of a representative meeting council, and God says, what are you doing here? He says, you called all the top people, or the kings or whatever, princes of all the worlds, and I'm the prince of this world. So you kicked me out, but you said all the worlds, and I'm the prince of this world, so I can come. It's a little loophole in your little rule, so I'm here.
The context of the Eden story is thus set against the backdrop of some sort of large-scale heavenly conflict in which Satan and his angels in which Satan has angels that are on his side. All his angels with him is what the quote is. What kind of war was this? And what kind of weapons were used? Did Satan believe that he would outmuscle God? The Greek word for war is polemos, from which we derive words such as
Polemics.
Thank you. The art and practice of argumentation or controversy. Oh, so touche with words. is what we're
Right.
talking
Yeah.
about.
So what is saying, the word used in that part of the verse there is polemos, in the scripture there. And so it's not the art of swinging a sword. It's the art of
verbal touche.
debate. Kind of like debate teams, and
It says
yeah.
Satan is a
Because
deceiver.
The debating team,
Mhm.
how could somebody tell if you're debating somebody
Mhm.
Sure.
about a point, and you listen to his and he listens to yours, and neither one of them gives any ground,
Right.
so nothing's really accomplished there.
Well, but usually the point isn't about convincing your opponent. It's about convincing the audience.
That's true.
To being more persuasive
Right.
for the observers to
Right.
come to your line of thinking.
And the same is true in politics.
So, but it says he was kicked out. Now, that's not convincing somebody else. It has to be physical, how you say, for him to be kicked out.
Yeah. Yep. So anyway,
It's like I said, we don't know.
yeah, but we'll be coming into that a little more here.
Okay, the Greek word for war is polemos, which we derive words such as polemics. Thank you. The art and practice of argumentation or controversy. Satan is a deceiver. Revelation 12:9. And
At least that's God's claim. He claims that he's not, of course, right?
Right.
So
well, and his claim
Right.
was that he's going to give ultimate freedom.
that's right.
The war in heaven was not fought with tanks and lightning bolts, but rather with words. What words? We can imagine that by the time Satan is involved in this discussion with Eve at the tree, that he has transformed his technique of pulling minds away from God into an art form. Thus, his words to Eve provide an important window into understanding as to what might have been said in the heavenly realm as well. What really happened? How could a conversation about a piece of fruit lead to such devastation?
But
That's-
again, Satan isn't staying out of heaven because he wants to.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, he's being limited to that one tree.
That's right.
Uh,
So there's force involved there.
Yep. There's some different limiting.
There's some force being involved, yes.
Yeah.
But we
And-
don't, I don't know, for some reason, we don't want to say that.
Right. But, you know, an interesting thing is that Satan claims that he will, you know, rise up equal to be equal with God. So if you're equal with God, then you should have, then God should not be able to force you to do anything.
hmm.
So the very fact that, you know, God is able to
Limit.
dismiss him out of heaven
Right.
and limit him to one tree on an entire planet for interacting with humanity.
Sort of gives you an idea who's in charge.
That's right. But Satan says, who should be in charge?
You're picking on these.
Excuse me.
Where were
I'm
you?
being paid.
Where were we?
We're in the middle of this paragraph here that says, let's try to understand the implications. Towards the bottom.
Okay, let's try to understand the implications of Satan's very calculated words. Now the snake was most cunning animal that the Lord God had made. The snake asked the woman, "Did God really tell you not to eat the fruit from any tree in the garden?" Genesis 3:1. The implication is subtle yet clear. Psst, Eve, say this might not be true, but I heard that God doesn't let you eat any fruit in the garden. Has God really restricted you to that extreme, Eve? It's a pity that God doesn't give his creatures much freedom. Of course, this was a direct contradiction to God's words to Adam and Eve that you may eat the fruit of any tree in the garden, any that is except one. Yeah, man, why are you so restrictive? You know, I can eat anything. You're just not letting me eat the best one. What's wrong with you, God? Why can't I eat anything I want? I just do anything I want. You know, just follow my heart, right? You ever heard that saying? You know, someone say that? I need to follow my heart. You know, whatever my heart feels, that is truth. Of course, this is, sorry that I read that. The snake's suggestion that God had limited her freedom should have been a major red flag to Eve and caused her to leave the scene immediately. Instead, she foolishly engaged with Satan in dialogue.
Well, look at today. You tell somebody like your kids or something, I don't want you to open that box. You better not open that box. That's a sure guaranteed way to get them to open the box. You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's in the nature to be curious and to rebel, to, you know, it so badly makes you curious what is going on.
Yeah, what's going on?
So, and I'm remembering some statements by Ellen White somewhere else that, you know, that very thing, you know, that's kind of why God didn't put out there, you know, state these laws and stuff beforehand, because just the statement of the laws, you know, and again, it's not so much, you know, you can't do this. It's more of, and I'm going to punish you if you do. It's a description of how, you know, it's like the laws of physics. It's a description of how things work. It's not a, you know, if you jump off a cliff, physics is going to punish you by killing you when you hit the ground. You know, physics doesn't care, you know, it's just, this is the way it works.
Literal natural
Yeah.
consequences.
So,
So I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Satan talked through the snake. But why did the snake get all of the bad things on it? Because he probably didn't have a choice as to whether the Satan presented through the animal or not.
Yeah.
He used
I
to
don't know.
fly.
As a reminder to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're doing it at the expense of the snake.
That's true, but it's a reminder to us.
But all of creation suffered punishment from, suffered under the curse
Right.
of sin. So not only the snake, but everything in creation has suffered, been under the
But
curse of
snake
sin.
suffered before
Oh.
mankind did. The snake was already
Yeah.
there, set.
Yeah, cursed is the ground for your, yeah. Oh.
Well,
Yeah. So
Oh.
the snake has a few extra minutes on us.
So when did, so here's another question. When did death and things start happening?
The withdrawal of life.
Yeah.
It
So
takes
to the
a
world
process.
or to, we know how it happens for us, but what about all the animals and what about all the maggots and the angleworms and all those kind of things? How about the butterflies?
I don't know.
Those kind of things. How did that work? We have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have
That's what we get.
description of, Adam and Eve's first realization of death was when they saw the leaves falling from the trees,
Oh.
for the seasons.
So they never got to see a nice yellow leaf before.
Yeah. Oh, no, because that's the only pretty thing they had to enjoy. It is beautiful, but it also, we have the description of that the earth, before the flood, didn't have all these rugged mountains, and to me the rugged mountains are absolutely beautiful.
And it says in Revelation, we're not going to have a sea in New Earth. So what happens to all the oceans?
Well, but we'll have big lakes.
Well, it had a sea, it didn't have an ocean.
No, it says no sea in the
Well,
Revelation says no sea.
it depends on, I'm sure that there's probably some room for interpretation of, whether a sea or ocean, from the old language, you'd have to really dig into the words there to know what it's saying for sure, because it depends on who's translating and context and all that stuff. So I'm not saying it is or isn't. Anyway,
Yes.
would you like to keep reading? Our very
Where are we at?
eloquent reader right up there.
Okay.
How about we don't have a clue? Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard,
Well-
but then into the minds of men.
Yeah. Well, there's the sea of glass.
Huh?
There's a sea of glass.
Not too many waves on that.
That's
There's
right.
truth there. So Eve's weak reply to Satan's accusation that God had been restrictive of her freedom suggests that she was already being lured into the trap that he would now spring. The snake replied, "That's not true. You will not die." God said that because he knows that when you eat it, you'll be like God and you'll know what is good and what is bad. Genesis 3:4-5. In other words, Eve, God has lied to you. God is untrustworthy. First, he limits your freedom and to come to this tree. Then he threatens you with death just because you're eating a piece of fruit that would be for your own good. What kind of God is that, Eve? On top of all this, the suggestion that Eve could enter a loftier state by eating the fruit
So,
was designed to stimulate selfish desires.
as if any of you are parents, I think most of us here are. How cruel would it be to limit your child to not, say you can't eat rotten apples. You can't touch the, red hot stove. What an unreasonable parent that is, right? The parent doesn't want the child to have to experience bad things. They don't They don't want you to even have the have to go through touching the hot stove to find out, man, that hurts when you do that. And God was the same way with the knowledge of good and evil. He did not want anybody, humanity, any of the worlds, even Satan and the angels that followed Satan. It was not his design for anyone to know sin. He and his infinite, smarts, his unlimited, he could perceive and see what would happen if you go down this path. If you choose to do these things, he could see what would happen. But other people who didn't have that depth of understanding, kind of chess player kind of infinite mind, weren't able to perceive these things. It says that God, the Father and the Son took Satan, Lucifer aside and showed him, and we talked about that in the first chapter of Patriarchs and Prophets. Took him aside and showed him, that chess game, how it would play out if Satan insisted. They showed him how this move, all these things would play out, and that Satan, Lucifer, in the end, would end up dead, the second death. And he was convinced. He had. She also says that Lucifer's mind was second only to Christ's. So he had a very good capability of understanding things. It wasn't up to par with Christ's, but it was good enough for him to fully comprehend what God the Father and God the Son were showing him. But so he was convinced that it was true, but pride forbade him. His own pride said, no, I can't admit to the rest of the universe that I was wrong. I will keep on playing the card. He's thinking, I saw that, I saw the evidence, but I know it's true, but I think I can make a difference. Kind of like the movies that we see these days about time travel. The paradox. Can I make travel back in the past and make a change that will affect the way things are happening now? So this mistake that I've made just a few minutes ago, I can fix it. If you can travel back in time, and Satan's all, if I can, they've shown me what will happen, but if I tweak my
response from here.
My choice and the way I do things, then it's not going to quite happen that way, and I still have a chance.
You had a comment.
Eve didn't know even after she beat the apple that she didn't know it was a lie. She didn't know.
Yeah, that's what this next paragraph says.
Yeah.
So Eve ate the fruit, but eating the fruit was merely an action that confirmed that she actually believed Satan's lie about God. This was not a poisonous apple, but actually a poisonous lie. What Eve and later Adam ingested was a lie about the character of God. Eve willingly devoured the lie that God, who created her, was restrictive and untrustworthy.
So one of the things that we can really pull from right there is that it wasn't the physical fruit that killed her, right? And it's the same thing with like baptism. Does going under the water, is that some magical water that you're going under that saves you? It's not.
It saved from Paris
Well, but
Yeah.
right, but it's not the physical act. There's nothing magical in the fruit itself. There's nothing magical in the actual baptism. It's there.
It's not holy water, is that what you're saying?
Right.
But
It's not
rather
holy water that's purifying you.
It's rather the surrender of your heart.
Right, because it's symbolic, and it's when you make those mental choices, It changes your own path. It's not some magical dust that is making this happen. It's your own way of thinking, your own trusting or not. It started out with not trusting. Sin started with not trusting. And then baptism is making a demonstration or, kind of a commitment. It's somewhat like,
Public declaration.
a wedding or a New Year's resolution. I am going to do this, and I am committed. I've signed this piece of paper that I am, for like a wedding. I've signed this paper that I am married to you for life, though many people treat it as life or till something else better comes along, or I'm just tired of you. They kind of added a subscript.
Shall I
But
finish the sentence?
Anyway.
It's, the sentence starts, Eve willingly devoured the lie that God who created her was restrictive and untrustworthy, and that he was selfish in trying to keep her in a lower state. Eating the fruit also symbolizes, her desire to elevate self. Soon after swallowing the fruit, reality was quickly turned on its head for both Adam and Eve. Now they saw God as one to be afraid of instead of Satan. The confirmation of this is that when God came to meet them in the garden, Adam and Eve hid in the bushes. I heard you in the garden and I was afraid and I hid from you. Genesis 3:10. Why were you hiding? They now doubted God's goodness and trustworthiness. They now wondered if God had really been on their side all along. And that is the key point of this story. Satan's plan was to distort God's character and incite Adam and Eve to distrust God. Satan knew that once they stopped trusting God, they would be powerless to overcome his temptations. Almost immediately, we see the spiritual sickness that plagues all of us manifested in Adam and Eve's behavior: fear, hatred, and selfishness. The Eden story is a microcosm that magnifies the essential issue of all issues. The central question in the cosmic conflict revolves around the trustworthiness of God's character. This war over God's character is the real mother of all wars. God might have won the battle in the Garden of Eden if Adam and Eve had only refused to believe Satan's lie about his character. In fact, we can safely assume that there would not have been a war in heaven in the first place had the angels refused to accept Satan's distortions about God. The war in heaven was most likely fought just like the one we witnessed at the tree, a war of ideas and principles. Political candidates often slander and distort the character of their opponents for political advantage. A political campaign based on lies and deceptions. Political campaigns are about winning hearts and minds. Adam and Eve.
Polemics.
Yes. If Adam and Eve had realized that Satan was the untrustworthy liar, they would have cast their vote for God, and planet Earth would have had an entirely different history. Jose, who we referenced earlier, who was sick and finally confessed about the heroin. Jose developed all the symptoms of botulism because he had injected himself with black tar heroin. That resulted from using this dangerous form of heroin. Likewise, we are spiritually sick with the symptoms of selfishness, hatred, and fear. It would make no sense for a physician treating Jose to merely treat his double vision or his weakness. Rather, he needed the underlying infection of botulism to be treated and eradicated. Only then did the symptoms begin to improve. In the same way, God's efforts have always been to work at the root of the problem, to vindicate his trustworthy character in our minds, and to restore us back into a healing and trusting friendship once again.
One of the questions that I'm sorry.
I'm gonna finish the paragraph.
Okay.
It's just got one more
All right.
sentence. Ultimately, this was done in the person of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. One of the questions that I had a discussion with my another person that is very, very active in deep study, and so we are not judging God. God, and that very much is the question of does God need to be vindicated? And it's not because we have a problem with the concept of judgment. We think, are we going to judge God and then sentence him? No, we have no power to sentence God. That's not the kind of judgment that we're talking about. We're talking about a judgment of whether we choose to follow his guidelines, whether they're the best. It's like choosing, judging to say, I want this guy for president or this guy for president.
Where our loyalty lies.
Yes, and where our actions are going to support. Am I going to donate to this president or this candidate or to this candidate?
With your time.
Am I going to do things that are in line with what they're saying is the best or what they're saying is the best? Or neither of them are good. I'm not following either of them. But
Just write your name in.
that's right. I'm going to put my own name on the ballot.
That's a vote for the other side.
I think you have to live by faith whether you have one or.
Yeah.
Yes, there has to be trust. That's the foundation.
One of the things I thought was interesting about this, how Adam and Eve did, how they were, is the fact that in order to eat from the tree of life, they had to have right there by the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They're both in the same spot.
Yeah.
So when they came into the garden to eat of one, there was the other.
Oh. Sure.
It says in Genesis 2:9, it says they're both there in the center of the garden.
Right.
So they have that choice.
So, and
Yeah.
they had the choice there. I think that was a little more.
One of the things that has kind of really always caught my attention is, what is the tree of knowledge of good and evil? It's the knowledge of good and evil.
Yes. But
You're eating of it, and you finally have an understanding of what evil is. Yet it's just as you eat it, you have an inkling, but it begins this whole cascade of things that it opens up that Pandora's
takes the
box,
scales away.
and it makes it
Through painful.
Right. You didn't trust. It's all hinged on trusting. You didn't, or faith. You didn't trust.
Isn't that what it's all about with God?
It's all about.
Yeah.
It's all about who do you trust? And how well do we trust?
Right. So I have an interesting question for you.
I have
Then-
more problem with trusting myself.
Well, that's a good thing, because you're not God.
No, but I said problems with that because you think,
There is a way that seemeth right
Right.
to a man, but the end thereof is death.
Definitely not on your own
maybe
understanding.
I can do this. Well, it's not really about what I can do.
Yeah.
It's everything.
Or what I think.
I have,
Although,
but I think, I don't know if I'm the only one that has those issues, but. I know-
Oh, yeah. Me too. Yeah.
yeah,
It's, and one of the things I want to come to again is, it's all about, it's all centralized around trust, but it's even, kind of the next level up above that. It's about love.
Right, but again,
Because-
it's not blind trust.
Right.
either.
Right. And,
There's plenty of evidence
oh yeah.
to let that trust grow.
Yeah. Every case where God, stepped in and, did a monumental or, just big action where, people died, like the flood. was there, clear evidence that God was, who he says he is and is going to do what he says he's going to do?
You gotta remember, Noah was the only one saved from the first world, and then same thing, Joshua and Caleb were the only ones who made it into the promised land.
Yeah.
Living by faith, really.
Yeah. And how many examples did the Israelites have coming out of Egypt before the judgment that, Joshua and Caleb and Joshua were the only ones going to be, he said to, go in. He actually, he didn't say to go in and, he didn't send the 12 in. That was their own idea,
Oh,
I thought Moses said.
but it wasn't God's
Oh, okay,
idea.
okay.
oh, he wanted
Moses
to-
said,
Yeah.
Moses
They were all
capitulated.
scared.
Yeah, Moses said, fine, if you're scared, we can do it this way. And, but that wasn't God's idea.
But, we sort of put down the Israelites and stuff and saying what was wrong with it. Well, guess what? We're not a whole.
Oh, yeah.
different,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Oh,
Human
yeah.
nature.
Oh, yeah. No, we're, as a group, we're no better, for
Because,
sure.
I listened to the normal lesson, right? And I didn't realize this, but, when they came out of Egypt, the Passover was a major thing and all
Yeah.
this. Well, guess what? They didn't know about none of the kings, David through almost to Jeremiah. Passover had never been kept. They didn't even know about the book of Deuteronomy. And it wasn't until Josiah, the priest there, found it in the thing and brought it to him that they even knew that there was such a thing. And I think, that's,
That's a long
and
time.
all during the judges was
Yeah.
when this knowledge sort of drifted around,
Kind of was
So what that,
lost.
A couple hundred years.
Yeah.
Well, think about how much our country has changed. In a couple
Oh, yeah.
hundred
Whoa.
years.
The last 20 years.
Well, take a couple hundred.
Mercy.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, she didn't have an airplane back then. Holy fuck.
So
She get around.
Yeah, she made it to
I
Australia.
figure 1800 was, sort of an interesting time.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Ooh.
yeah, we need to start winding down because got to make sure we're done before
Oh,
they start.
yes. They need to-
But, so, everything revolves around trust for the purpose of love. But is there anything that God has a higher goal yet than love? What is the goal of every parent for their children?
Wisdom, love.
But if they have those things, then they will be what?
Successful.
And success brings
Reward.
happiness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was it was the
Yes.
existence in, like we're talking about the diagnosis, what was happening that went wrong from the way things were before you got sick? So before you got sick, before any
Oh,
sickness
yes,
happened,
yes.
what was it like in heaven? It was ultimate happiness. Why? Because of love. And why is there love? Because of trust.
That's hard for us to imagine because our world, we live with stress and problems all every day, every second, and there's always something. Right. So it's hard to imagine an era and place where there's no stress.
Right.
We sort of survive, live on stress. Some people enjoy it,
But we so much look for, what is the formula for, getting to heaven? And
Trust.
God's all, you got it wrong. You're focusing on the wrong thing. The goal isn't to get to heaven. The ultimate goal is for happiness. But to get there, you have to love me. In order to love me, you have to trust me. In order to trust me, you have to observe, study and read the evidence and see what I've done for you. I've given my life for you. I've, planned all this stuff. This is the way things work best. I'll tell you about the future, what's going to happen. I'll show you that the stuff that I've predicted and, long time ago has already happened before you. So there's so many different things so that we can trust him, so we can get into that relationship, so we can love him. And so that, through that love, the experience of a husband and wife getting married, having children, that experience of such deep love brings the ultimate goal of God for all the beings in the universe to have happiness, and not all these pain, suffering, and death. That is his ultimate goal, is to bring happiness for all those he loves.
So let's look at the text that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path.
And I think the trust is fine to read about it and sort of get an idea. But really, the only way maybe I can do it, for me, is things in my life that weren't happening to me that build my trust.
Sure.
Right. A good example is a story about a very a specialist, like trapeze artist. He sets up a tightrope across the Niagara Falls, and he takes a wheelbarrow and goes across and is doing all kinds of weird stuff on this tightrope. He comes back and he takes his assistant across in the wheelbarrow, and they're both doing weird crazy stuff. And then he comes back and you see the evidence that this guy has got all the talent needed to take care of whoever's in the wheelbarrow. And he says, do I have any volunteers? You just saw the evidence that you could trust him,
But it's not a personal.
but it's not a personal thing.
Yeah.
So how did that assistant, get to trust the master? Through other smaller evidences.
Right.
And God invites us into that walk with him. He doesn't ask us to go across Niagara Falls in a wheelbarrow on a tightrope. He asks us to trust us in the little things. And
it saves us before we even start the journey.
right. And the saving isn't going to heaven. Yeah, that is the second part. But we got to wrap
Time
up.
is done.
Yep. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to close with a quick word of prayer. Dear Father, thank you so much for being with us today, and this example that has walked us through Genesis and Revelation and a few other texts that really bring us around in the this big war that has happened. Help us to continue to dive into this, to understand it more fully, and the amazingness of your love for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.